Hello everyone, Dr. Michelini here. This video is about finding and integrating sources for your new final research paper. I know this is a little bit of a different type of paper that you may not have encountered before, so I'm going to go through it with you step by step. Step one here is finding sources. How do you find sources for a paper like this, right? Well, let's review what we've done so far. So far, we've identified a text that we read this semester and pointed out a connection that we have with it. We've had ChatGPT write the best paper that we can get from it. Earlier, you critiqued and praised this paper earlier this week, and now you're ready to dig a little bit further. Based on your critique, what did ChatGPT get wrong? What sources did it leave out that should have been included? What sources did it fabricate? And here's a real source for it. What do you have to say based on your connection? What sources do you want to include to back up your main point? Any of those are valid directions when you're looking for additional sources to support your eventual final paper here, okay? So what kind of secondary source research are we doing? Any of the following are valid options. One, you can look for articles or websites on literary analysis. So articles that are on a specific text, like a specific poem or a specific short story. This would be an article that analyzes the story Today I Am Paul, or analyzes E.E. Cummings' poem, right? There's not a whole lot of these with texts from this class that exist, purely because I really like to choose modern texts. So this would probably be the hardest option, okay? So I'm just starting there to say that's the hardest. A better way to go typically is to focus on a theme. So this would be like feminism in black box, pointing out that that's a theme, or sexual assault. And that if you wanted to explore that, to write about that, if you wanted to explore artificial intelligence in Today I Am Paul, or you wanted to explore, coming of age relationships from Inevitable, Mahogany L. Brown's poem that a lot of you wrote about. You could focus on a theme, something that poem or story is about, that ChatGPT left out or it got wrong in some way, and now you can say, here's an article that's actual valid information about this. Or you can focus on impact, okay? So where has this text had an impact in today's society, or how does this actually play out in real life? So I'm going to walk you through a theme and impact example today. But first, I want to show you where are good places to find reliable sources. So the number one is going to be the library databases. If you haven't yet explored the library databases, you definitely want to, okay? Let me go ahead and open that up. There is a main bar here that you can explore. You can ask a librarian for help, or you can explore the databases further individually. I highly recommend reaching out to librarians if you're having trouble finding information, because their job is to help you find stuff. There's also Google Scholar. Google Scholar is Google for scholarly articles, so for like legit stuff that you can trust, okay? It's a great place to start for research if you have a broad question, like, artificial intelligence and caregiving, right? Artificial intelligence and caregiving, okay? You can see what's out there on it. Anything with a link here is free. The only problem with Google Scholar is that some of these are going to be behind a paywall. Like they're going to ask you to pay to see the article. Do not pay, okay? Don't pay. Copy and paste the title of it into the library database box and see if the library has it. If they're asking you to pay for it, you might as well see if you're already paying for it, okay? If not, you can always ask a librarian to help you find it if that's something that you feel like you really, really want, okay? Last but certainly not least is a new database called Consensus. And Consensus is really cool. It is artificial intelligence, and it kind of helps you with the finding of sources, with figuring out what the answers are to your questions. So I'm going to show you an example. You can literally ask it a question. So you don't have to, put words in the same way that you would with the library databases or with Google Scholar. You can ask it like, What will caregiving with artificial intelligence look like in the future? Okay, and it will answer the question as best as it can with reliable sources. If you like, you can turn on the synthesize, which will give you a little summary of the 9 different articles that it found. And you can also turn on Copilot, which will help summarize some of the articles for you. This is really helpful for you to skim and see, like, what am I looking at here? And then it'll tell you, if you turn on Copilot, which article this information is in. So if you're talking about, disease detection and artificial intelligence, articles 1, 2, and 3 talk about that. If you're talking about, treatment and outcomes, articles 1 and 6 talk about that, okay? And you can click on those and it'll take you right to it, okay? You can also cite using the cite button. You can click on this. It'll give you a little overview here. You click into it to see the full article here, okay? And here's the full text, all right? So really, really cool stuff. I highly recommend checking out Consensus, okay? It's not something to miss out on at this point. It's a really cool resource for you. So that's where I would go to try to find reliable sources for this. You can also just use websites, but you want to stick to .gov, .edu, or .org websites. .com websites are not as reliable because com stands for commercial, so they're typically selling you something, okay? All right, so let's talk about some further tips for finding and integrating sources. Something that you want to consider as you're digging is your own perspective. So why did this text resonate with you? Is your perspective present in the paper ChatGPT wrote? Is your peer's perspective present in the paper ChatGPT wrote? Remember that finding sources is not just finding these other sources from websites or articles, but you're also integrating a peer's perspective at some point here. If you are having trouble finding sources, focus on themes, not the text itself. So don't Google artificial intelligence in Today I Am Paul. You might not find all that much because it's such a new text that there's not that much written about it, okay? But if you are interested in Today I Am Paul, you can Google, the themes in it, or Beauty Contest is the same. It's a brand new short story, so focus on the theme. Okay, as you are going through, make sure that you annotate, you make those notes on the side for yourself. You don't have to turn in notes about the article to me, but you definitely want to be looking for 3 or more quotes from a secondary source to incorporate and support your point that either ChatGPT missed this, or this is a source it should have included, that kind of thing. And of course, 1 quote from your peer. So you want to be going back through and looking for a quote from a peer from a previous CCQQ discussion board. All right, so I promised to take you through an example here. What we're going to do is focus on the story Today I Am Paul, and I'm interested in asking Consensus, what themes from Today I Am Paul resonate with real world scenarios? So what from that story could actually be real? So I'm focusing on theme, but also on impact. Like, where does this play out in society today? Okay, so I typed that into Consensus. I actually ended up editing my question a little bit, which is a smart thing to do when you're researching. You can start with whatever your question is and then, tweak it a little bit. Research is not like a one and done kind of thing. You typically have to search multiple times to get what you're looking for. So I ended up asking this question, can artificial intelligence help fix the caregiving crisis? So there's actually a caregiving crisis where there's not enough healthcare workers. Are robots going to be taking care of us? Are androids going to be taking care of us, just like in this story in the future? Who knows, right? Okay, so this is one of the articles that I found. It says, will artificial intelligence solve the human resource crisis in healthcare? Note that this is not the first result, right? I scrolled, I searched again, I sifted through the articles until I found one that I felt helped answer my question, okay? All right, so here is a clip from this particular source. Note that I already have set aside my MLA citation here. This is written by 3 or more authors. So if your article has 3 or more authors, you can simply use the author's first name, or the first author's last name, Mesco, and then put et al. So this quote that I'm thinking about including says, every second post-millennial believes that they will work together with robots and artificial intelligence within 10 years. The healthcare workforce crisis is due to at least 3 major issues: doctor shortages worldwide, the aging and burnout of physicians, and a higher demand for chronic care. An effective system depends on the availability, accessibility, acceptability, and quality of its health workers. It is estimated that the needs-based shortage of healthcare workers globally is about 17.4 million. And the aging workforce is an additional challenge. With the increase of life expectancy, population over 65 is expected to double by 2030, and the number of chronic illnesses, the demand towards the healthcare system is also constantly growing. Okay, so I have highlighted a quote that I want to include in my own paper where I'm saying like ChatGPT didn't get this, right? But this is important when it comes to talking about Today I Am Paul, all right? But I've noticed something here. This quote has a 2 next to it. So 2 means that it's linked to the second source in the references or the work cited. So I click on that 2, and here is where that information actually came from. So because the information is from a different source, I actually need to look up that source and see, like, is this source useful? Because I'm citing like a source that's citing another source, right? So I want to make sure that I'm doing my best to be accurate. So here is the source that I found. And here's a quote that I pulled from the World Health Organization there. It says, "It is not all about numbers. The goal of universal health coverage requires a paradigm shift, going beyond a discourse on shortages, but rather focusing more explicitly on the accessibility, acceptability, quality, and productivity of the health workforce, placing equity at the center of the agenda." So I've decided I want to include this particular part of this quote, all right? So now I'm up to part 2, which is integrating sources. So at this point, I found my sources. I used my first source to even find a second source to back it up, right? So I can quote both of them now. You're not limited to just 2 sources in this paper, like your peer quote and your secondary source. You could use more than that if you want to. So you can pause the video here if you want to go ahead and find your sources and find your quotes to back up your critique and back up your main points when it comes to the paper that you're going to write. When you're ready, come back here to see how to integrate sources. Okay, so what I've done here on the left is I've combined those 2 quotes because they were really saying the same thing. Like I found where the World Health Organization was being quoted in Mesco and al. Okay, so what I do is I cite both of them in the parentheses because they both said this. And that just makes my point stronger because it means not only did Mesco et al. Say this, but another source said this as well. And they're both valid sources, so it makes me look better and smarter, right? More people backing up what I have to say. So here's my quote from them: "An effective system depends on the availability, accessibility, acceptability, and quality of its health workers." And then I went through the discussion board and found a quote from a student, Ava, and she wrote, "My question from reading this is, how was the family okay with the android constantly impersonating them and people that aren't even alive anymore? I thought this was a great question, and I want to include it in my paper." All right. Plus, I need to make sure that in my paper, I am also critiquing ChatGPT's paper. So I got to talk about that. And I got to talk about Today I Am Paul. So you're actually doing a pretty complicated balancing act here of juggling many different sources: a secondary source, a peer quote, ChatGPT's paper, and the text itself. So make sure that you have all of those. So here's one potential topic sentence for that body paragraph. I wrote, "One of the things that stood out to me the most when reading Today I Am Paul were the implications for caregiving, particularly in light of the current shortage of healthcare workers." So I found out that, there's implications here for caregiving because we don't have enough healthcare workers. And I've cited my source. I don't have an exact quote here, but the information came from those sources. So I still need to say where I got that information from, okay? So it's really important that I cite. So here's what the rest of that paragraph might look like. You already know I have my topic sentence. I just read that. Then I have paraphrasing supporting details from my secondary source with a quotation. I wrote, "According to Mesco et al., an effective healthcare system depends on the availability, accessibility, acceptability, and quality of its health workers. But unfortunately, there's an increasing shortage of these workers worldwide. So I put some in my own words here. That's called paraphrasing. And some of it I did an exact quote. Mesco et al. Suggests that artificial intelligence may be a long-term solution to this problem. So now we're connecting it to the text, right? Here's my connection to the story. Using sentient android caregivers, however, comes with its own problems, as explored in Today I Am Paul. Now I can connect to my peer quote because Ava pointed out a problem, right? Sentient androids pose philosophical questions, like the one Ava asks when she states, how is the family okay with the android constantly impersonating them and people that aren't even alive anymore? Now you'll notice I haven't yet connected this back to ChatGPT's paper, right? So this is something that stood out to me that ChatGPT didn't mention, but I got to say that at some point because ultimately I'm critiquing ChatGPT's paper and saying what needs to be said about this story. So here's my concluding sentence. Everything else written above is the same as what I just read to you. I wrote, it is these kinds of philosophical questions which display the potential for extreme harm regarding sentient artificial intelligence. This is a point left almost entirely unacknowledged by ChatGPT in all versions of the paper I prompted it for. So when I asked ChatGPT to write a paper on Today I Am Paul, it only wrote about the good things about sentient artificial intelligence. And by the way, I think that's kind of a funny thing about this AI currently, the generative AI that we have, it usually leans towards the positives of artificial intelligence. Sometimes you can get it to write about the negative. So I've seen it done, but it tends to lean towards the positives. So it did not cover, some of the pitfalls of this. And it didn't quite cover how this might actually happen with healthcare workers and the things that we need to consider with that, right? So this is just one paragraph. This is like a snapshot. I know I didn't unpack everything here with the healthcare workers, but I wanted to give you an idea of what it might be like to balance all these different sources in one paragraph, okay? Additional tips, make sure that you transition between paragraphs by using transitional phrases and connecting between ideas. Make sure you always answer that question. So what? Like, why am I talking about this? Did ChatGPT leave this out? Did they find a source, but it was fabricated, right? They listed a source, but it was fabricated. So here's a real source to back up what I had to say. And when in doubt, make sure that you cite. I have a few examples of citations here. Here's how to cite a secondary source in MLA. By the way, if you use Consensus or if you use the library databases, you can click that MLA cite button. We're at a point now, thankfully, where we don't have to go over this stuff in detail, but here's an example for you. And here's where I found the information if you need it, okay? Come back to this to double check. Here is how to cite a website in MLA. Website, you might need to come here and look at this because citation machines like EasyBib are unfortunately still not super reliable. So you're gonna start with the author, which is usually a group author for a website. Put the title of the page, which is down here, like the actual page. Then the title of the site as a whole. This whole site is the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the link, and the last date of access. Now, something you probably don't know at this point or might not know is how to cite ChatGPT and MLA. So I'm going to show you. The works cited page looks like this. You're going to put the prompt that you typed in. That's your words asking ChatGPT to do whatever you asked it to do first, in quotes, and then put prompt. ChatGPT goes in italics. The version number. The company is OpenAI, the date of access that you access this chat, and then the general link, okay? Whoops, I actually clicked on it. There we go. Okay, here's an example, all right? So here's the prompt that someone wrote, ChatGPT 3.5, OpenAI, and everything else is the same. You might be thinking, how do I cite it in text? Here's what this would look like. If you have a quote from ChatGPT, you're going to put the first 3 words of the prompt. So here's the prompt that this person used. So therefore, that's what goes in the actual sentence before that period, okay, in parentheses, to show that that's the prompt that I used. So you're going to use the last prompt that you used when you are citing from that paper, okay? That about takes us through it. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Good luck finding and integrating sources for your critique paper of ChatGPT's paper.